So today I want to talk to you guys about one of my favorite topics, and as you may have guessed, liquidation, and more specifically, manifested versus non-manifested pallets, and the pros and cons of each one, and what you need to look out for regardless of which way you're sourcing. So we're going to talk about that on the other side. So without any further ado, let's go. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is John from Flippin Ain't Easy. And as I mentioned in the intro, we're going to talk today about liquidation, manifested versus non-manifested lots. And before I begin, just want to give my audience an update. I'm in a little bit better spirits because I was able to get a few lots today and yesterday, and it's looking good. If you guys haven't known, I've been in a slump in finding merchandise. That's half the battle for me, is finding good liquidation merchandise. And I feel like I've been able to do that the last couple days. So hopefully I'm back on track. But I learned a lot from this experience. Of course, I'm not going to get into that. So back on point, and that is liquidation, manifested versus non-manifested pallets. So I guess it's a good idea to kind of give you an idea of what each one is, right? Because that's generally there's only two ways you're going to find liquidation. One way is manifested. So a manifested pallet is one that is a lot of goods where each item or most items in that lot have been accounted for, usually in a list or a spreadsheet that is visible to the potential buyer. And a lot of times these lots are presented online. I mean, it's possible you can find lots that you can go and visit, and there's a list of each item may be attached to the pallet. And that'll give you an idea of what's inside that lot. The other way of buying liquidation is simply a non-manifested pallet. And as you figured it out by now, that's a pallet that doesn't have that list, doesn't have that manifest that tells you what's inside. Now, as you can imagine, if I have two lots, one that has a list of what's inside and one that doesn't, you can imagine which one has the most demand, or more people are attracted to the idea of buying a pallet that is manifested versus non-manifested, because of course, like most people, we don't want to get burned. We want to know what we're investing in. There's pros and cons to each one, and I'm going to talk to you about that right now. So manifested pallets, let's start there. Manifested pallets are usually going to be more expensive, and I kind of touched on that already a little bit, and that is because all the hidden gems, there are no surprises. You know what's going to be in that pallet. Now, I say you know with quotes because many of you guys have bought liquidation before. You know that you're not necessarily going to get what's on that list. And there's usually a disclaimer on a lot of these sites, these liquidation sites, that state they have like a 4 to 5% error rate on the manifest. And the manifest just gives you an idea. It gives you an idea of what's in the manifest. And a lot of times the manifest will give you an idea of what the retail cost is if you were to go into the store and buy all these items. Now, caveat to that, there's a lot of sites out there that will inflate their manifest to make it seem like the lot has more value than it does. If you have time, let's say you're on an auction where you're dealing with, say, a few hours left in the bidding, you can go in, if it's a big enough lot, it might be worth your time to go in to, let's say, an Amazon or a popular retailer and plug in each of the items, or at least the higher ticket priced items on that manifest, to see where they really fall in line and see how accurate that manifest is. Because if you utilize my 40-40 method, and I'll put that link right up there, if you utilize the 40-40 method, you got to have an accurate idea of what retail actually is. Because while most of these items are customer returns that you're dealing with in these liquidation pallets, you're generally never going to get back full retail when you list it on eBay or Amazon or Mercari, right? You're going to get back Usually my formula says, my 40-40 method says, all you're shooting for is 40% of retail, okay? And that's on the low side. That's saying that, I got this pallet, I'm getting a mix of almost brand new and just beat up goods. And the median price that you're going to get back is about 40% of retail. Now, I build my formula to allow me for a low expectation, meaning that if I get a good lot, get 50, 60, or sometimes more, 70% of retail, then that's just gravy, right? And we don't want to set ourselves up to be disappointed. So if you utilize my 40-40 method, it definitely will help you when you're dealing with a manifested lot. Now, what I do, if I have the luxury of being at home to check out the manifest versus, let's say you're at a liquidator and they just have a list of goods. If you have the benefit of doing this at home, what I do is I take the manifest data and I copy and I paste it into a spreadsheet. Now, this part of it usually requires that you have some idea on how to use Excel, maybe take a couple quick how-tos on how to do the basics of Excel. But I copy and paste this information into an Excel spreadsheet, right? And then what I do is I just sort the data by price, per item price. So maybe I have items that are anywhere between $300 as the top item down to $5 as the lowest value item in the lot. And so I will allow my spreadsheet to sort that, and then I'll go in and I've set a threshold. What do I want to bother with? Well, you know me, if you've watched these videos, that $5 item, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to set a threshold. So for my purposes, I'll set $40 as the threshold. Now, the reason why I set $40 is because on average, you're going to be able to resell that item for about half of what the listed MSRP is. So if you guys have been watching this video, I'm not trying to sell anything that's under $20. Yeah, I've done a little bit recently because I've had really no merchandise to sell, but generally it's $40. I'll list it for $20, but if it's anything less than $40, I will then go in and remove that from my spreadsheet. And then I'll go back in and I'll recalculate what the actual MSRP is of that pallet based on getting rid of all the stuff under the threshold that I set, which in this case is $40. So that $10,000 MSRP pallet might now be down to $8,000 after I remove all the junk, what I call junk. And so then what I'll do is I'll apply my 40-40 method to that, and that allows me to get sort of a true value in that pallet. And yeah, maybe I'm going to end up with about 100 items that are under 40 bucks. Some may have some good resale value. Some I might be able to lot together and sell more than $20. But that's gravy to me. And you're always trying to make a little room for yourself so that you're not disappointed with a bad lot. Now, a couple caveats here with manifested pallets. You want to be careful for some of those top loaded pallets that are, you have a 10,000 MSRP pallet, may have 400 items in it, and you're dealing with like 2 or 3 or 4 items that are over 100 bucks. Maybe you have one that's like 400 or 500, really looks good, right? But the other 90% of your pallet is the stuff that I would normally throw out under 40 bucks. For many of you out there who like the $10, $15 items, those might be okay. For me, I steer clear of those. I'm looking for value. I would say at least about 50 to 60% of that pallet I want to be able to work for me. Again, I put that manifest in my spreadsheet, and after I wipe out anything under 40 bucks, if I'm left with a handful of items, that's a pass for me. Now, here's a quick way to help determine the value of a manifested lot. Let's say you're at the facility, you're not in front of a computer, maybe you just don't know Excel very well. You can take the MSRP of that lot and find the actual piece count. Now, if you have a manifest, you'll have a piece count at the bottom where there should be an idea of how many items are in that lot. And you'd simply take the MSRP and divide it by the piece count. So if I have a $4,000 MSRP lot, and let's say I have 100 items in that pallet, so we know we're looking at a $40 average cost or MSRP retail cost for each item. And that'll give you an idea if it's worth your while. For me, if I come across a lot when I do that quick calculation and it's under that $40 threshold, I tend to pass because, I want there to be a good mix of really good stuff. And, of course, there's going to be stuff under my threshold. But if it doesn't average out to my line there, in this case, $40, for you, it might be 30, then I take a pass and I move on to the next one. So that's a quick way to sort of calculate the average cost per item, which is very important because you don't want to end up with a manifested pallet of stuff that's like $5 to $10 per item, unless you're trying to sell in bulk or you're dealing with small margins and just want to add a lot of work to the whole process. You really want to try to have your average cost of goods higher when you're listing on eBay. And of course, sourcing is the start of all that. You got to make sure that you're dealing with stuff that if I'm into the item for $5 a piece and I'm only going to make 20, that's after shipping, right? Why would I want to sell items that are $10 to $15 with that same average cost of $5 a piece when it's all said and done? So you got to think about it. You got to look at some of these methods. My 40-40 method is pretty good, but these little quick methods are also a game changer. Now we're going to get on to the other side of the equation, and that's unmanifested pallets. And a lot of people are kind of scared of these. They get scared away because, it's an investment. Liquidators know they don't have a list. It's just they put a bunch of goods out there. And because of that, they don't get as much return because the buyer may not know really if there's any home runs in there. So they're taking a risk. And a lot of times, because you're buying it for a lot lower, the risk is worth taking. I've done many purchases of unmanifested pallets, and I like the fact that my cost of goods are lower, and therefore I definitely jump on it. I'm more attracted to unmanifested pallets than I am manifested pallets because of the fact that there's a chance I can get a home run in there and I don't have to pay the premium that I'd have to pay with a manifested pallet. Now, when you're first starting out, try to deal with only manifested at first, because I've had a lot of people tell me, hey, I bought pallets, I'm new and it didn't work out for me and it left me in a bad position where I lost money. And that's the last place you want to be. So to start out, you want to get your feet wet with manifested pallets, because these unmanifested pallets can be a little touchy if you're not sure what you're looking at. So let's say you're dealing with electronics like me. Buying some manifested pallets will allow you to get familiar with the product, right? And then so when you're looking at unmanifested pallets, you can actually now say, oh, I've actually sold that. I've sold one of those. You can start identifying things in the pallet, gaining that experience from the manifested pallets that will help you make an informed decision. Whereas if you just jump into an unmanifested pallet, you're really taking a big risk, an unnecessary risk as far as I'm concerned. So I guess it goes unsaid that you're really counting on one thing, and that is your ability to identify what's in that lot by just looking at it, right? Forget condition. A lot of times you're not even going to be able to know what the condition is on really manifested or unmanifested, but we're dealing with a group of items that you can't even really touch or hold or inspect. You're really just counting on what you see. And so you're dealing with maybe brands. So if you can zoom in on whatever that lot is to try to find an item, maybe the brand and the model number, maybe you can pull a comp up on eBay to get an idea of the value. And for every item you see in that pallet or that lot, maybe you can make a little list and put down the actual comps to give you an idea of what you're going to make on that unmanifested pallet. And then a lot of times what I'll do is I will then try to assess, try to guess if, I have multiple views of that pallet, how many items are in that pallet. Now, there's no scientific way to figure that out. You just got to kind of maybe just count as crazy as that sounds, count the number of items you see from the vantage point that you have and sort of guesstimate, like when you go to that birthday party and they want you to guess how many jelly beans are in the jar, something like that, right? And so you got to use that sort of methodology to figure out, what am I getting in this lot, okay? So that'll help you get an idea of maybe a piece count. That alongside, the limited data you're able to find with the comps and pulling up the comps like I mentioned, will help you get an idea of the resale value in that lot. And you don't want to be into that lot for anything more than 40 to 50% of what you're projecting, at least on your list, that you're going to make, because the higher you go, the less return you're going to get. And you got to be able to have some self-discipline, and maybe you've done a lot of homework on this lot and you figured out, hey, I can make $500 on this. But if you're spending $200 for this pallet, it's getting to a point where if you go any higher than that, you may not be making any money. A couple other things, something I can tell you from experience, and of course Archie is also experienced biscuit butt, and that is, consider, if you have this information, consider the weight of the pallet. I would say most average general merchandise pallets, the Gaylord size pallets, are going to weigh about 400 to 500 pounds, okay? If you find a pallet of goods double that, chances are it has, of course, a lot heavier items, but what can those heavier items be? Reams of paper, liquids, which you really definitely don't want, food, things that you don't really want to deal with as a reseller. Generally, the ballpark for me is 400 to 600 pounds. Anything lighter than that tells me that there's a lot of linens or clothing involved, if that's the kind of thing you're into, that might be something you're looking for. But you know me, I don't deal with a lot of clothing, and so I tend to shy away from anything that's outside of that range of 400 to 600 pounds in a pallet. And lastly, mystery boxes. You guys have seen me open mystery boxes, and I can tell you that I wouldn't even have bought a single pallet of mystery boxes had I not had the experience of dealing with that particular liquidator. And knowing that liquidator I was working with, knowing the merchandise that I bought from him or her before, it gave me confidence into at least trying the first set of mystery boxes. And if you are going to dive into mystery boxes from a liquidator, there's nothing wrong with that, but just make sure you're not diving in too deep, you're not spending too much money. And a lot of times these mystery boxes have no, other than general merchandise, it could be from Amazon, could be from another retailer, there generally isn't an MSRP attached. So generally on a 15 to 20 box lot, I wouldn't recommend going any further than $500, $600, maybe $700 on the whole thing. Anything further than that, you're really setting yourself up for a disappointment. If you pull out, you can watch some of my videos. I'll leave a link here to a series of videos I did where I got really hosed, and I think I was into one of those boxes for like $770 after fees. So you don't want to dive in too deep and be in too far, because the last thing you want to do when you're buying these lots to resell is be in a position where you're just selling the stuff to get your money back without any hope to make a profit. That's so demoralizing. To me, that's one of the things that make you want to quit in this business. When you run into one of those lots that you're just hoping to get your money back, that's a waste of your time, your money. You could be doing all kinds of different things than buying a bad lot to resell. So guys, what do you think? Please comment down below. I know there's a lot of information in this video, a lot of information from my previous experience. Hopefully these tips can give you some insight on buying liquidation if you haven't done before, or maybe you have and maybe you haven't been so successful. Maybe this will give you some information that can help you maybe do a little bit better next time or on your first time. So guys, do me a favor, if you appreciated the time that I took to make this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, I'd appreciate that. And of course, you want to be notified when I make another video or go live, hit that notification bell so that you can be part of my next live stream whenever we do that. So guys, discerning what type of liquidation pallet to buy when you're sourcing, whether it's manifested or unmanifested, these are all more examples of how flipping ain't easy. And I want you guys to have an excellent remainder of your weekend, and I will talk to you very soon.